Hi, this is Matt from the Athena Group. Today I want to talk to you a bit about why spaced repetition software sucks and what to do about it. So, I first got started with spaced repetition many years ago, and I was really into it at the time. If you don't know, spaced repetition software is this type of software where basically how most spaced repetition software works is that you have a flashcard, you have something on the front that's a test, and then on the back you have the answer to see if you got the test right. And the idea behind this is that it's spaced in such a way so that you don't waste any time learning, and yet you have the maximum chance of actually memorizing what you're trying to memorize. So I was deep into this. I had a database that had around 3,000 cards in it, which isn't huge in the community, but also isn't quite small either. And I always thought that it would make me this ninja, and I would know all the processes and the techniques and the knowledge that I learned. I wouldn't forget anything, and therefore I would have superpowers. Now, in reality, what this ended up doing for me was much different. It did not give me these superpowers where I could use the right knowledge in the right ways. So, for example, one of the things I memorized, I'm really into business, and I was memorizing a lot of business advice and processes. One of the advice I memorized was Peter Thiel's hiring maxim that if there's any doubt, there's no doubt. So if you have any doubt in hiring somebody, then you shouldn't hire them. Okay? And I memorized this, and I would know that, hey, what's Peter Thiel's hiring advice? If there's any doubt, there's no doubt. The problem with the spaced repetition software was that when it came time to hire somebody, did I remember that maxim? Absolutely not. The spaced repetition software is contextless. So I would remember if somebody asked me, hey, what's Peter Thiel's hiring advice? If the spaced repetition software asked me it, sure, I would remember it, but it wasn't indexed with actually hiring somebody, so I didn't remember it when I needed it. And this is true of many processes, ideas, pieces of knowledge I learned. Now, the pieces of knowledge that I did end up using, because of the types of knowledge they were, definitions, and how to pronounce words, and the things that spaced repetition is really good for, turned out that's not actually good for being smarter and being a ninja. It was great for sounding smart, and I sounded a lot smarter, a little bit like a know-it-all, but I didn't actually, wasn't actually made any smarter by my spaced repetition software. Fundamentally, the problem with the spaced repetition software is that it only gave me the affordance. It only put me in a situation where I could learn the material at the surface level, whereas I think a good learning system should take you through the different stages of learning. So what do I mean by the different stages of learning? This is a model from called the Hattie Donahue model that takes you through different stages of learning. Now, there's a lot to this model. You can see there's the inputs, there's the outputs, there's different stages of each of these things. I want you to look at the top where it says surface, deep, and transfer learning. That's the thing I want to focus on today. Now, as a side note, John Hattie, one of the people who created this model, he is one of my research heroes, not because of this model, but because of something else he did called the Hattie effect size list, where he created 252 different learning interventions and ranked them by effect size. Just the sheer scope of this work and the fact that he was actually willing to claim numbers here. He was willing to be wrong. The sheer hubris of what he tried to do here. I wish more fields did this. I wish more fields had somebody like this who was trying an ambitious project to help their field. Now, this model, the Hattie-Donahue model, gives 3 steps to learn it. The first step is surface learning. This is about facts, figures, definitions, pulling out, this part's important and this part's not. All of these are things you do on the surface level. Now, surface is not bad, it's not shallow, it's not negative. It's one step in the learning process. So the spaced repetition was helping me with that. But again, it didn't give me the affordance to go beyond that. And the affordances it allowed me, in fact, were to stay at that level. Now, the next level of learning is deep learning, okay? Deep learning is about situating your knowledge in context, understanding how it's related to other knowledge, and understanding how you can use it in your life. And we're going to talk about more about that in a second, okay? Now, the final stage of learning is transfer learning. Now, this is when you understand the deep principles behind what you're learning. You understand it so deeply that you can make analogies to other unrelated fields and export your knowledge to seemingly unrelated context. So my favorite example of this is I heard an interview with Josh Wayskin, and he was a chess champion for a while, and then he moved over to push hands, which is a martial art, and then he found himself back at a chess tournament. And as he was playing chess, he noticed he wasn't thinking about chess concepts like openings and traps and all this. He was thinking about it proprioceptively the same way he thought about push hands, the space left behind, and putting his opponent off balance. And he knew those concepts so deeply that he was able to transfer them to this totally unrelated context. So that's transfer learning. That's the 3 stages of learning. And I believe that any good learning system should create the situation where you automatically go through these stages. You shouldn't have to, like in space repetition, there's ways that you could create cards that do the right thing. But that's not the note card model doesn't lend itself to that automatically. And I believe that any system you create should lend itself to taking you through these steps. So, many common methods of learning focus on surface learning. You have highlighting, right, which is about what's important, noticing what's important. That's surface learning. That's great. Do you go beyond that? Spaced repetition, again, it's about testing your knowledge and memorization. That's surface learning. Progressive summarization, which is a sort of a mix between highlighting and spaced repetition. Again, same thing. It's about highlighting and continually going over and figuring out what's important, but not going beyond that. And there's a great article on this by Nick Milo called Why Progressive Summarization Must Die that I recommend you check out. So the question is, how do you create a system that can take you all the way from surface learning all the way through to transfer learning? Now, to do this, you have to understand what are the types of thinking. How do you think about things that take you from surface to deep to transfer, right? So in surface learning, it's all about what's important. What are the definitions? What are the concepts, right? Now, as you go into deep and transfer learning, there are 4 principles here, and these are from Dr. Stephen Chu. He has an excellent 5-part series on YouTube about how to learn. I recommend checking out. So there are 4 principles of deep learning that we find can take us from the surface to the deep, and as they're applied on deeper and deeper levels, eventually to the transfer learning section. So the first one is elaboration. How does this concept relate to other concepts? How is it similar? The second one is distinctiveness. How is this concept different from other concepts? What distinguishes it? The third one is personal. How can I relate this to my own experience and things in my environment and examples I know? And the final one is appropriate application. How can I use this tool in a way that's similar to how I want to use it in the future, in the context that I want to actually use it? So this is, by doing these 4 concepts on deeper and deeper levels, right, on the very shallow level, when you're elaborating on this, it's really surface learning, right? But as you get beyond that, all of these principles, as you continue to iterate on them and apply them on deeper and deeper levels, you'll find that you're going from surface to deep to transfer learning, right? So whatever system you create, you want to create the affordance to use these ways of thinking on deeper and deeper levels. So that brings me to my tool for doing this that I call progressive expansion. I do it in this program that you see here called Roam Resource. Now, the idea behind progressive expansion is that you use it to progressively expand on ideas. And as you're expanding on them, you're first expanding on them in a surface way. And then automatically, you sort of run out of surface things to say. and you end up expanding on them in deep ways. And then automatically you sort of run out of deep things to say, and you end up going into transfer learning. So this is a very, very cool process to sort of automatically take you through these things on a spaced repetition schedule. So you're still getting that, okay, I'm not doing this more often than I need to, or less often than I need to, but you're getting it in a way that takes you through the process. So the first thing I recommend, so you want to have a Roam account, that's roamresearch.com. You're also going to want to have this extension called Roam Toolkit. I'll link that below. And what that allows you to do, when you're in any node, if you just press your keyboard shortcut, it will automatically create a spaced repetition functionality, okay? So you can see here it has the interval, the factor, which are the two things you need to know to figure out when to show it next, and then it has the date when it should show up. So I can immediately, on any block, on any time I'm taking notes, when I'm like, hey, this is important, surface that, right? Press my keyboard shortcut, and suddenly this is going to show up tomorrow in my progressive expansion system. Okay? Now if I miss a day, and I like to have systems that are robust to missing a day or going on vacation or whatever, then I have what's called a query. So I have queries are ways in Roam Research to find particular blocks. So I have a query here that's looking for interval, which is only in my spaced repetition things, and it's looking for anything between today and before. So if I miss a day, this shows all of my due progressive expansion items. Okay? So what am I actually doing to progressively expand on these items that show up in my query? So what I'm doing is I'm using a Roam Research feature called attributes. Attributes are a way to define formal relationships between different blocks and pages in Roam Research. So what I'm doing is I'm taking a concept. Let's say I have the concept of progressive expansion, right? And I add these attributes to them. One is similar to, okay? So one thing that's similar to progressive expansion might be progressive summarization. And I don't just say that it's similar to that, right? That's not going to take me beyond surface learning. I then say why I think it's similar to progressive summarization. Because we are progressively iterating on knowledge. So now you see every time this comes up, right, I'm going to add a formal relationship. Either something that's similar to this idea, something that contrasts with it, right? So you might also contrast progressive summarization with progressive expansion, because progressive summarization is about making things smaller, and progressive expansion makes things bigger. That's one contrast between the two. I'm going to think of examples. I think Sonke Aaron's How to Take Smart Notes and his Zettelkasten method is sort of an example of accidental progressive expansion that ends up doing this. And I also might do application. So, hey, could I use progressive expansion to help me think about this area of my life, right? Now, if I'm so surface that I really don't understand this concept yet, I'm still trying to understand it, then what I'm going to do instead is create questions or notes. Okay, this is me thinking about the concept. This is me asking about the concept and not knowing. And this is another way to expand on the concept. So every time this comes up, all I have to do is I see what comes up. I go ahead, I add one of these relationships, like a contrast with, right? And then I go down and I use my keyboard shortcut here, and it schedules the next progressive expansion session. So you can see how by consistently thinking about these relationships, these questions, these ideas and notes, how I'm going to automatically go through that process. Now, there is sometimes, right, where I end up in a situation where I don't know how to, I don't know anything to add. I can't think of anything to add. And I've added so much, and I am trying to go to the next stage of learning, but I just can't think of anything. Now, in that case, an acceptable thing I'm allowed to do, instead of adding a relationship, is to create a progressive expansion for one of the concepts that is a relationship to this concept. So I could create progressive expansion on the progressive summarization concept. If I can't think of anything, I'm going to allow myself to instead create progressive expansion on this concept. Now, what this does is it's not only progressively expanding a single idea, but it's progressively expanding a tree of ideas that are then expanding themselves. So this creates a really fascinating interlinked both in my brain and in Rome, which is key because it can come up as I'm thinking of it. It can also, whenever I'm in any of these topics in Rome, it will show me how they're linked to other ideas, and that will help me think better. So that is progressive expansion. Thank you so much for watching. Now, this is part of an experiment. I'm going to be posting 5 videos for 5 days, see how it goes, and if people like it, if it goes well, then I'll be doing more. So click subscribe somewhere. Don't just click it. You can smash it. You can demolish it. You can fission reaction on the subscribe button. And thanks so much for watching. And I'll be posting again tomorrow.